So welcome everyone. My name is Carolyn Wood. I am the Director of Educational Quality Improvement over at Harvard Medical School. I'm a staff member here at Harvard and a teaching and learning specialist. I want to begin today's session by just acknowledging for a moment what a tremendously difficult year we've been through between the COVID pandemic, the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and so many more. And the incredible political and social upheaval that we are experiencing, with some predictions of more to come. I hope that everyone is doing okay. I hope that you and your loved ones are staying safe and that you're finding a way to stay grounded. So if we zoom into thinking about the higher education space, I think we may well look back on this year as a pivotal moment where all of us were plunged into online learning with literally no notice. It was kind of an overnight all-in kind of thing. There is no doubt that we all experienced challenges and some learning, and that we probably experienced a good bit of growth. I want to thank Vice Provost Bharat Anant and the whole VPAL team for hatching this idea of a multi-day showcase to create a space for reflection and sharing, and thinking about some of the silver linings that we might want to kind of hold with us that might inform how we approach teaching moving forward. I also want to say that I feel like it's hard to follow on the amazing showcase sessions that I have seen in the past 2 days. It's a pretty high bar, but we're going to do our best today. So in this session, we're going to showcase approaches to creating a culture of feedback in online teaching. So if you ask faculty what they have found difficult about online teaching, I think you'll likely hear a great deal of angst about teaching through a computer screen. It's always hard to read our learners, even in a face-to-face classroom, but it's even harder when we're all in little boxes on a screen. It's hard to have side conversations. It's hard to chat with students before and after class, and you certainly can't bump into people in the hallway anymore. So faculty and students have reported that in this new online-only world, it requires more effort to connect with each other and kind of understand how the messages that we're sending to each other are actually being received. There's a lot more friction. Luckily, today's panelists have experimented quite a bit with innovative approaches to fostering a culture of feedback, not just after the course ends to improve it for the next cohort, but all along the way to improve the course in real time. They will share strategies for eliciting frequent, honest, and actionable feedback, and they're going to share some examples of how they use some of that feedback to improve their courses. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my co-facilitator, Noelle Lopez, who's Assistant Director for Equity and Inclusion at the Bach Center for Teaching and Learning in FAS. Noelle.
Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. I have this great task of getting to introduce our main speakers. So I'll just go into that. So without any further ado, really. So today, joining us this morning, there is first Todd Rogers, who is a behavioral scientist and professor of public policy at the Kennedy School. And his work focuses on applying behavioral science insights and methods in order to understand important social challenges and to develop interventions to mitigate them. And beyond that, Todd is faculty director of the Behavioral Insights Group, which is big. I love that acronym there, and faculty chair of the Executive Education Program on Applying Behavioral Science to Improve Public Policy, as well as director of the Student Social Support R&D Lab. I'm really excited to hear more from Todd today about his way of approaching feedback. And I know too that Emma Starr is here, who has worked with Todd as both in teaching and research both. And I know that Emma's had a big influence also on the ways that Todd has approached feedback in some of his classes. So And then our second speaker today is Liz City, who's a senior lecturer on education at the Harvard Grad School of Education, where her work combines both pragmatic and imaginative approaches to helping children and educators reach their full potential. Focuses include educational leadership, collaborative learning, professional development for educators. And Liz has also served as a teacher and principal, as well as an instructional coach and consultant. So all across the board on teaching and learning, and is also the executive director of Reach Every Reader, which is a very cool collaborative initiative to promote and support early literacy. So I believe Liz will be starting us off with about 10 minutes talking about approaches to feedback. And then we'll kick it over to Todd, who will have also about 10 minutes. And then there'll be about 10 minutes for dialogue between before going into breakout rooms, so everyone can have a bit more time to discuss amongst ourselves. So thanks, Liz. I'll kick it over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Noelle, and thanks, Carolyn, for the invitation. Welcome, everybody. Excited to be here with you today. This session is about feedback, but as you saw, it's about culture of feedback. So I'm going to talk about both things. And so first, I'm going to show you one of the very first things I do in every class that I'm leading, which is, or even meetings I'm having, which is just to invite people to unmute for a moment and do a voices on hello. So I'm just going to invite you to do that real quick.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for organizing.
Thank you for indulging. It's always nice to warm up in the chat box, but I find it also helps to just get the actual voices in the room. So when I think about feedback, as Noelle just said, I'm a teacher. I used to teach middle school and high school students. I've been a principal. I think about feedback from the perspective of it as an educator. And for me as an educator, if you ever want to know how learning is going, just ask the learners, right? So for my whole career as an educator, I've always thought, whether it's seventh graders or adults, just ask them. And actually seventh graders are more likely to be honest than adults about how things are going. But that's kind of first how I come to feedback. And then I also am a leader. I've done a lot of leadership. I teach a lot of leadership. And so one of the things I try to do in my courses is model how I hope people lead. So I want them to have a learning experience that's similar to also kind of what I hope they do. And one of the things I hope they do as a leader is create cultures of feedback in their own organization so that they show that they're not perfect, they can be vulnerable, they can mess up, they can fail forward. And you do all that in front of other people, and then it creates a different kind of organization for people to try to succeed in. So I try to model that in my classes too. So that's kind of how I first come to it. And then I have a favorite tool I use for feedback, and I'm just going to show it to you. And then I'm going to talk about how I build the culture part. So just a couple quick slides here. So my very favorite tool for feedback is this thing called a plus delta. I use it in all the meetings I lead as well as the classes I teach. And the idea is really simple. At the end of the experience, so at the end of a class, I ask for pluses, things that worked well, that supported your learning, and deltas. Delta is Greek symbol for change. So what could we improve? What could we do better next time? When I teach on Zoom, I give people a link to just put it in a Google Doc, which I'm gonna show you a screenshot of in a second. In person, I use this tool as well, and I do lots of different things. I have people give the feedback out loud. I have them do sticky notes, index cards, electronic, all sorts of things. But on Zoom, I just have them either chat it in, which is not anonymous, or just a Google Doc, which is anonymous. So I'm going to show you, one of my courses I taught in May, it had been designed totally differently, and I had to pivot and teach it in May for the first time ever on Zoom, and it was not designed for that. It was supposed to be a hands-on thing. And I'm going to show you the very first feedback I got from the very first Zoom class I taught in May. So this is, you're not supposed to be able to read it so much. I just wanted you to see that the deltas are about twice as much as the pluses. And so as an instructor, I kind of went, that's not usually what happens when I teach. I love deltas because they help get better. And I always tell people that, but I was like, oh no. So I got all this feedback at the end of the first class. And then what I do with the plus deltas is I reflect them back the next time I'm teaching. In May, it was the next day. So I had only 24 hours to respond, but this fall, it was a weekly session. And it's really important with plus deltas, basically, to not respond in the moment, to kind of process it on your own, And then the next day, reflect back, here's what I heard from you, and here's what I'm doing and not doing as a result. I always say to people, you don't have to respond to everything. You just have to show that you heard it and then put it in the context of the next day. So the next day, session 2, here's how I reflected the feedback back. I synthesized it a little bit. There were so many deltas that I bucketed them. Some of it's about content, some of it's about logistics. People were like, breakout craziness, too many breakouts, and you'll see also what happens with plus deltas is sometimes you get conflicting feedback. People love something, other people don't like it, and you kind of have to figure out, what do you want to do with that? But that's just the really basic tool for the plus delta. And then I'll say, here's what we're going to do today. So, you said too many breakouts. So I've ramped down the breakouts for today, but you liked having a chance to have a simulation. We don't have a simulation today, but instead we're going to blah, 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 blah. So you kind of put the feedback in the context of, this is what I changed. This is what I didn't change. And here's what we're going to do today. So that's my favorite tool. For people to give you this kind of feedback, though, you have to create the culture. And I've got in the slide deck, which we'll share with you, a link to what's my fall version of this too. So you'll see I get different kinds of feedback because I learned from the first run, what to do. So for building culture, it starts before class. So for all of my classes on Zoom, I don't do this in person, but for my classes on Zoom, I've given out surveys that are range of tech questions, how are you accessing this? But I also asked, what's been your favorite thing about learning virtually? And what have you found challenging? Really helpful to know from people, and helps me kind of think about the environment. And this fall, people said they were just having trouble staying engaged on so many Zoom classes, right? And they said, please don't lecture at us. They said stuff like that. And then I asked them a few personal questions, not super personal, but just let me get to know you as a human. A lot of our students are actually both working and going to school now because they're in Zoom land. So I wanted a little more about that. And then this was a new one I tried this fall, which is I asked them to share a fun fact that they wouldn't mind being shared out. And I didn't know how I was going to use this when I asked it. I just wanted the human connection. And then I asked if there was anything else we should know. And then also before class, this fall, in both the classes I taught, I had the students write a letter to my teacher, which is an assignment I've used before, but I didn't use it in May, but I just felt like I didn't know the students very well for all those informal things Carolyn was talking about. So just for your reference, I put in here the exact language I use to invite them just to tell me a little bit about themselves. And that was just for me. And I responded to all of them in the first week, just a couple lines, nothing big. And then the other thing I did was I had the photo printout of everybody in the class. And I just jotted little notes by it, here's where they are. Here's a couple little things to jog my memory. Huge soccer fan, has 2 kids or whatever. And then for each other, I asked them to post an intro video and watch each other's. So that was all before class. And then during class, we set some tech norms. I tried to make sure they know I'm human, show my kids or my yard. I looked a little silly the first class, doing a little dance in the context of a simulation, all those kinds of things, I'm a human too. Help students see themselves in the curriculum. This is really important to me as a teacher, but I think it's also really important for a culture of feedback. So what's on the syllabus? Do they see themselves reflected in the syllabus in some way? Their professional identity, their personal identities, who are the authors on the syllabus? Same kinds of questions. And then who are in my class, one of my classes, we had a lot of guest speakers, who are those people and what kind of messages are they sending about who I think is a leader and that kind of thing. And then what we ended up doing with those fun facts, this was my TF's brilliant idea, is after break in class, we spent 5 minutes doing community flair, is what we called it, because it was connected to a simulation we had done. And I just invited 2 people each class to share their fun fact. So the first class, it was somebody who likes to doodle to make sense of things, and then somebody who'd been a ballroom dancer in college. And so they just shared different things. Another time we had somebody do meditation, somebody was a stand-up comedian. So it was real quick. Everybody brought their pets and kids one day. It was real quick, but it just made this kind of human connection. We also, in my other class, one of the students was really into music, and she curated a whole playlist on leadership songs, and we played that. And then there's content too, like how are they getting the content? There's the regular assignments, but it's also, in one of my classes, they were meeting on their own in small groups, and we had this elaborate kind of Google Doc, share out, blah, 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 all in May. But then we streamlined it in the fall, and we said, okay, each week we want one person from each small group just to post in the discussion area of Canvas something you're taking away. You don't have to speak for your group. We don't need a report out, just like what's up for you. And that was a real quick way where we didn't have to go through like 12 groups slides to find out what was going on for people, just to see what was up. And here's just an example of like, this was the community flair side. So every class I would post, like I had about 50 people in this class. I would post like 10 or 12 of them. And then 2 of those would be the ones that people actually shared live with people. And then here was our tech norms slide. And just all stuff you guys are probably all veteran at, but I just try to, one of the things I heard from students in the pre-survey was, sometimes I just need to turn my video off. I don't have good internet, I have stuff going on. So I tried to just normalize, like, that's fine. Just like Carolyn did, like keep your video on if you can, if you can't, da, 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 da. And then, just trying to try to create the culture. So I think I'll stop there and turn it over to Todd. And we can always answer more questions later. Over to you, Todd.
Great, thank you, Liz. That first, can you hear me? Yeah, good. Okay, thanks. That's something I learned on Zoom, is that I should not just launch into speaking and then blindly continue. I would have loved to have taken your class, Liz. I don't have any of the skills of your students though. Comedian, dancer, juggler. I teach a class I taught a class this past fall called The Science of Behavior Change. I have taught it for the last 10 years, and I update it and revise it every year based on feedback at the end of the year. And so it is like the culminating product of lots of students' inputs, and the class has ranged from, every semester between 30 and I've had between 30 and 200 students. So it's sometimes very like 100 students per section. And it's not a discussion course. It's about borrowing the insights from across different disciplines on the science of behavior change for helping people make better choices. So it was not like Liz's class before this sort of built to be a culture of feedback. I get feedback at the end. It is incorporated, and it has reflected lots of input. And I actually, it is a modified version of a collaborator of mine at another school. We both, like, every year before, during, and after the semester teach similar classes and improve it. But of course, pivoting to doing 100% online was a completely new game, and I spent a lot of the summer redoing the course. And so, as opposed to Liz, I wasn't willing to be that flexible with the class that I had developed with 80 hours of work this summer based on taking the Slate and Hilt online curriculum. So I was not planning on it being a course that had a big culture of feedback. But then very early on, speaking to the void, it became clear that we had no idea how the class was going. And so my teaching fellow and a research fellow in my lab, Emma Starr, who's on right now, had this brilliant idea: why don't we ask? And that seemed like a great idea. So at the end of every class, we sent out a little link, and I'm not going to show a slide deck. What I'm just going to do is show just a couple of examples of the physical things that we used. So Liz, I see you on my screen. Can you see that you just see the posting here? Yeah, good. So at the end in the chat, Emma would send out, what did you think of today's activities? Let us know, here's a link. And then and then immediately afterwards, they would go to a Google form where it was, what's one thing you enjoyed, what's one thing that should be improved, and then a couple of other questions. It was very short. And then exactly as Liz said, then and this was anonymous, and I'd be interested in having a discussion with Liz about the sort of benefits of keeping it private versus anonymous. What was good for me about anonymous, I didn't want to have to deal with suggestions about completely restructuring the course midway through. And I have a hard time, I don't know how to deal with students who say, I want A and I want not A. But I now thinking in preparation for this, thinking about this conversation, I probably could just acknowledge that different students are at different places, but instead, and in the future I will. And then the class would begin, then we had our team meetings where for faculty and people involved in teaching, I didn't really, in an ideal world, I would not read all the feedback. In an ideal world, someone else would read it and synthesize it for me. And the teaching team did that, which it's not just time savings, it's more ego protection. Because sometimes the feedback, sometimes it like rattles me when I get this feedback. So I had Emma and Sarah Kovar and the rest of the teaching team, sort of someone would always read it and summarize it. And then in our teaching meetings every week, they would just say, here's some things that were good, here's some things that could be improved. And it saved me time, but also the emotional pain. And then the opening of the next class, exactly like Liz said, we would just say, like, thanks for the feedback. Here's a couple things we heard from the feedback. So more proactive polls, but less. Early on, I didn't know how to do the polls, so I did click yes if you agree, if the answer is 12, and no if the answer is 9. And people couldn't find it, they were confused. It turns out they wanted just polls. They didn't want questions throughout. Like normally when teaching, I have control of the class and I can say, I can take one question now and then whatever. They wanted them clustered. And they liked breakout groups, just as examples. So then we ended up with all this great feedback. And I want to sort of just give some examples of the things that we learned about that I didn't anticipate. One is when students go to breakout groups, they often lose track of what the point of the breakout group was. And so we always send them out to a breakout group with a Google slide with the task, which looks like this. So it's just a Google slide that says, here's the most, here. So Sarah, one of the teaching team, would just send out to the group in the chat, breakout rooms, use this slide. And then the slide is just, here's what you just saw going out there. Nope, I'm trying to end this. There we go. Another good one that I didn't anticipate was that the one of the great benefits of teaching online for me, and I actually found this to be one of my favorite teaching experiences so far, because I felt like I got to know the students better. They're all over the world. Some of them are in countries that were currently in revolt and revolution because their incumbent president was refusing to step down, and I'm completely serious. And they're just like learned a lot more about my students. But the other thing was that one of my fears when I teach is that we'll go out and we'll do an activity, and I never talk for more than 10 minutes. So I like, as a rule, I never continue for 10 minutes without some activity. It could be a solo activity or something, but I always have these activities, and then they share back what they did. And it's really hard for me to artfully guide an incorrect answer to correct it, have the student feel respected, and make sure the rest of the class knows that that is not the right answer. Not as punitive, but just for educational purposes, legitimizing the wrong answer confuses people. And so I always struggle with this in the classroom. So now one of the things we learned was they said that they like hearing from their classmates when they come back from breakout groups. Could we have everybody enter in the chat a summary of what they wrote, of what they did in the breakout? And that ended up being great for me teaching wise too, because now one sentence summary, they go into the breakout groups with a reporter, they come back, one sentence summary, and I get to call out the ones I want to call out. And if there's common mistakes, I can call that out when I'm ready to do it. Or if I just want to make sure everyone knows what the right answer was and talk through how it worked, I can say, Carolyn, tell us about your completely perfect answer. And then I can sort of avoid the needing to artfully transition. lots of little things like that where I found out that the students were talking about how to run the class better, and it didn't require me to make big structural changes, but little tweaks. And the students gave great feedback about how they felt like they were heard. Several students said they talked to their other class faculty to try and get them to do similar things. So takeaway, it allowed us to improve our practice on the fly without complete overhaul, and create a sense of community among students and feel like they were being heard. And I think it made it a much more pleasant experience for me as the faculty member, and I think the teaching team. But me as the faculty member, I knew I was getting feedback on the fly things they liked, things they didn't like. And I also was protected a little bit for my fragile teaching ego. And that's it. I mean, the culture of feedback was, for me, much more inadvertent and unplanned than for Liz. Like, it seems like I would rather be in Liz's class, but mine sort of is moving in her direction. So Liz, I think we're supposed to now.
We get to talk to each other.
Yes.
You're cracking me up, Todd, because I would love to be in your class. And I think I heard us both talk about students being heard, and it's amazing how little you need to do to help students feel that way. Like those examples you gave, it was reminding me of things like, students told us, can you just put a timer on during break that has an audio signal so that if we're not at our computers, we know to come back? Like, bam, like done, the next class, visual timer with an audio ding, right? Or like, yeah, I have too many screens open right now. Can you guys like streamline how many things I need to look at the same time during class? Like stuff that's like really low hanging fruit to fix, and you fix it and they're like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, we just like for also in breakout groups, we do the same thing now where they ask to get a warning before the official 1 minute warning. So we send a 3-minute warning just to give them a heads up that they need to be wrapping up. Little things that I don't know because I'm not going through the experience. But Liz, help me with this anonymous versus public plus delta, because I kept it anonymous. And I made it, and I also didn't have a collective because I think I just wasn't prepared to deal with if I wasn't dealing with a student's comment. But you must have wrestled with this, anonymous versus public.
Well, there are trade-offs. So I for my fall classes did it anonymously, in part just because it's easy for everybody to be in a Google Doc, and I really wanted that. And I had heard from a lot of the students that they had a hard time speaking up in class in this environment. So they had said that. And so like I did anonymously. In person, I very deliberately mix up the modes and methods. Like some days I'll do it not anonymously, like we're just going to do a plus delta at the end of class out loud. You hear from fewer people, and only the people who are willing to say it in front of everybody else, right? And you have to really encourage the deltas in that context. I love deltas. We can't quit class until I have 2 deltas. Like you have to really normalize that. And then you have to stay quiet while they're giving them to you and not be like, but I did that because, so the ego thing is real in those moments, but it's also really powerful because they're like, wow, you're just taking in that feedback. You're not, I can say things to you. So, but I also, like I said, sometimes I give people sticky notes, and like on the way out of the classroom door when we're live, put up the sticky note, or you have an index card and you just hand it to me on the way out. The key thing I found, I was curious, Todd, you said you had them do it after class. And I found if I invite them to do it after class, like, cause I've run out of time or whatever, I get very little feedback. I get way more feedback if I do it live. I guess the other non-anonymous way I do it in Zoom is just have them chat in. Hey, just chat in pluses and deltas, like right in the box. And then you can see their name. So, but it still feels a little safer, I think, to people than speaking it to you, to chat it in. So yeah.
You are so brave. And you have never received the feedback I received my first year teaching, where there was these anonymous comments. And one of them was like somebody must have thought they must have been proud of themselves for this one. They're like, how could you improve the course? And they're like, well, you could replace Professor Rogers, but I don't think that would be enough.
Oh.
And it like haunted me. And then I know my colleagues at HBS they actually, it is a service offer to summarize your comments for you. And I basically have never read my comments since, because it really polluted my ability to interact with those students, because every student who came to my office, I was like, you said that, didn't you? That was you. And so I'm sure no one has ever said that to you. And I don't, I've now had, a couple thousand students through the class. Like, I don't know that might have, I was bad in the beginning and I'm less bad now. But I would be afraid of that. But in addition to just, again, like, it would be better if Professor Rogers had more hair. Like, in addition to like just fear of terrible feedback, but also like I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared, and I'm not prepared to reboot the course if they're like, I wish we had twice as many breakouts or half as many. Because like I had sort of, my parameters for change were pretty narrow, whereas I feel like you're much more open than I am.
Well, I think as like I am pretty flexible in my teaching, but I also think you can set the expectations with students about what I often say to students. Some things we can improve for the next class, and some things will be for the next offering. And I really welcome both kinds of feedback. Like, some things we can't adjust to. So, and I
like that.
So that's clear. And also, every class, when I reflect the feedback back, there are things they said they wanted that we can't address. So I always just acknowledge that. And it is, I think, just the being heard part. I mean, I've had plenty of negative feedback. That's why I showed you guys the first slide. That comment you shared is just mean, though. So I think like part of it is people need to feel like they're in like a community, right? If you're in a community, you don't say stuff like that to each other, right? So, but I'll show you real quick. Like, I still get feedback that pinches. Let me go back to this.
And Liz, I'm over it. Just you don't have to call me afterwards. I'm recovered, kind of. But it's been 10 years.
Well, and I mean, we're all better teachers 10 years on, right? But just if you look at this real quick, like, there was a video I had shown in that first class that, so someone wrote, I experienced like a pinch, is what the language student used, because as a Black male, I felt like the video reinforced stereotypes. And this is a video I've shown live. A lot of times I've talked with African-American colleagues about it, and most people find it very inspiring. They love this video, including many, many African-American people. But this particular student, it didn't land well. And if I hadn't asked for that feedback, I just wouldn't have known that. So that student would have been carrying that through the rest of the class. But instead, that student was brave enough to tell me, and whether they would have said it out loud, I don't know, but they told me anonymously. And then I was so horrified. I had to figure out, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to respond? And so I talked it over with my teaching fellow, and then I just reflected it back and acknowledged the feedback, and apologized for the impact on that student, and said, I love hearing feedback. I want this to be a place where everybody feels included and heard and valued. And so that was that was May. Like, that was, so I guess, Todd, for me, I feel like I'd rather know, even though it hurts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally. Emma and I, there was only one student this semester across multiple sections who seemed to have a really terrible semester. And we didn't know it until we got the feedback. There was just ones on everything. And Emma and I have been talking about how we could have found that student sooner. And maybe, I don't know whether in class. Emma, what do you think of the feedback at the end of class versus during class? How we might have. Emma was the teaching fellow for the class.
Yeah, I've been a teaching fellow where we've used both during class or after class. And I think there are definitely pros to finding time for in class. We were tending to run over anyways. But what I thought was good about our approach was that we weren't requiring them to submit feedback. It was just offering it, making it known that we cared if they wanted to, but that we weren't putting any additional burdens on them. I think that the Zoom semester was really cognitively overloading for a lot of our students, and just making things simple and optional, I think was a great tool for keeping them engaged and invested in the course.
Yeah.
I
also want to say we only ever went 1 minute over. Emma, I just want to make sure that my colleagues here know that we made it so that like I was like, even if I wasn't done, I promised the students we would end on. And then I stuck around for 10 or 15 minutes after every class, which actually was really rewarding. Normally in person, I would not do that. I'd be scheduled for a meeting immediately afterwards, and it gave me a chance to learn. I mean, they're all over the world and in different situations that when they're sitting in front of me, I don't really get to see. Liz, I'm sorry, pass back to you. I just want to clarify that I didn't violate that rule of going
That is true.
over.
Very true.
Sometimes I give them that minute back the next class. I'll be like, I owe you a minute. I'm going to end a minute early, but usually I'm too stingy with my time. What I was going to say when I saw Carolyn's post there is, and to our theme, Todd, when you get conflicting feedback, like part of what I do is just show them that, because part of it, I think it's actually valuable for them to see, I experienced the class this way, but someone else actually loved the thing that didn't work for me, or vice versa. And I think that helps them just realize, oh, right, we have different learners here. And they can see there's no way you could possibly please us all. Like they get that, you know, they're students at Harvard. They get like when they see dissonant feedback, so I think it helps them give us a little more grace when we feel stuck.
I think that's right. I mean, moving forward, I think I would do that especially when there's a chance to, when some student really doesn't want what we're currently doing. Like some students have not wanted, this is a recurring one. So 1 or 2 students would consistently say, well, I don't want to hear from my classmates. I don't want this sort of active discussion for any of it. And then other students would say they really liked it. And so I just sort of never referred to those comments. I could have easily just sort of made that student who kept complaining about their classmates' contributions just shown, which I guess it would have just been like, look, there's different feedback. This course is structured as we described in the very beginning. With every class, there's a few segments for feedback, and students seem to like it. Some students may not, but that's I'm just practicing for next year.
And also, I know Noelle's going to send us into breakouts, but also the other thing I do there, Todd, is just say, sometimes I explain why we are doing something. Like, here is why I have that in there. It's connected to the learning in this way. So even if it doesn't work for you, like sometimes knowing why we have that, like the purpose helps people find it more valuable. Okay, Noelle, over to you to get us into breakouts.
Yeah, thank you both so much. This is super fascinating. I can just like keep listening to this conversation. But yeah, we do want to give a chance for everyone here to have a chance to talk in smaller groups about what you're thinking about, what you're struggling with in collecting feedback, or maybe it might be things that you're thinking about if you're staff that works supporting faculty or graduate student teachers. So I'm going to share in the chat right now some instructions for the breakout rooms. So these are some instructions. We're going to go into breakout rooms now, roughly 6-ish people per group, and it'll be about 20 minutes for the breakout rooms. You'll see on this Google Doc here that there's a suggestion to just take a few minutes to say hi, how's it going, introduce yourselves to each other, and then maybe 15 minutes or so to discuss these few questions. So we put a few questions in here just to spark some thoughts. There might also have been things just now that are inspiration for your conversation too. And then at the end, we definitely did want to encourage just leaving a few minutes so there can be surfacing just like one idea that's coming out of your conversation together, and choosing one person from the group to come back when we come back all together in the main room to share that idea out in the chat. And then we'll have a little bit time for Liz and Todd to wrap up with us. And yeah, I think that's about it. And breakout rooms should be ready to go. At any point, we'll be in the main room. So if you have any issues, just feel free to come back here. So welcome back, some folks. Others will be coming along slowly. But in the meantime, if you had a person who was chosen to share something out in the chat, that'd be awesome to get going on that. And we'll hear more from others as they are exported from their breakout rooms.
I call that getting kicked out. Exported sounds nicer, Noelle.
Okay. So welcome back, folks. Awesome, yeah. So already you'll see there's some folks that are sharing their idea in the chat, and just an invitation for anyone who is kind of the point person for the breakout rooms to share that in the chat. And I think Liz and Todd will do a little roundup from those share outs.
Yes, we will. Give people a minute to get some more things in here.
Yeah, Liz, one thing that I also was surprised by in teaching online was their tolerance for me reading. Like I'm always afraid to take time to slow it down. But like I'd be like, okay, guys, I just need 1 minute to read this. And then they would just sit in silence while probably shopping on Amazon.
Well, yes, and I invite them to read each other's too. Like, let's all take a minute to read this. But yeah, they can see like I need to actually read this in order to know what you're doing. I'll jump in with one, and Todd, you go ahead and pull one out. But the one Lisa just put in about fist of five, just real-time feedback. We didn't really talk about that. So just, we talked about how you get feedback at the end, but I also sometimes sort of temperature check during, because it is really hard to pick up the vibe. Like, do we need more time on this? Do we need to, what do we need to do? And so the fist of five, for those of you who haven't seen it, like, is just a, 5 fingers means, yeah, as Lisa said, everything's awesome. Sometimes people use it for decisions and agreements, but you can also just say, how's it going? And I would just have people use their thumbs. Like, do you feel ready to move on to the next thing, or do you need a couple more minutes? This is in whole group, like, give me a thumb, or, or do you have a question, or, and so I think you can do those just visual things too.
Yeah, I see Carrie Foley talking about handling conflicting feedback and creating a word chart to represent. But can you tell us more about that, please?
Sure, I'm more than willing, and David, it was actually David's idea, and he explained it really in such a great way. So I'll invite David first. But if you don't want to
screen share, I'll show you my word chart. If you can allow me to screen share for 1 second, because it's basically a way to disarm students. At the beginning of class, I showed them a word chart from previous feedback, which has a lot of interesting things in it. One of which is that, conflicting, here it is. This is a course I taught. This is my, and what I like about it is lectures too quick and lectures boring and slow, deals with conflicting stuff. There's also blunt and abrasive, and so I had a student who that term decided he or she was going to try and game the system. And then I go to this, and the whole idea is just to disarm my personality, which is somewhat blunt and abrasive, and get students to realize that I'm not taking myself too seriously, and they shouldn't either.
I love that. And it also shows, David, some of what other folks are saying in the chat box of, a lot of it is just showing students you hear them, and that, like, you can handle it. Like, yes, we all have fragile egos at one level, but on the other hand, like, we can handle it. So tell us, and it can be funny, and we don't take ourselves that seriously some of the time. And so I think some of it is, it doesn't all need to be actionable. I totally agree with that. And just a humor goes a long way. Yeah, I love that. So many great, just concrete ideas in here. So I hope the rest of you are reading this chat box. Are there any dilemmas in here? Oh, I guess there was, other David asked, like, what do we do when you have so much feedback? Todd, what do you do with that?
When there's too much feedback, well, I again, remember my strategy was to cherry pick the things that I can deal with. And so I would cherry pick the two to five that are most actionable, or that I'm definitely going to deal with. But a different version of that question is, how do I deal with feedback that sounds sensible that I'm not going to deal with? And my answer this past semester was to just not acknowledge it, which is not the right strategy. I don't know what I think in the future I would probably put it up and use the framing that you had of, well, there's feedback for the course and feedback for class to class, and that is a great suggestion. That thank you for that, and we'll incorporate it moving forward. Yeah.
But you have to distill. Like I distill, both in an ongoing way and also at the end of the course way, because otherwise you're changing so many things, like potentially, that you might lose some of the good stuff too. So there's a balance there. It's really helpful to have colleagues. Like some of the courses I teach have teaching fellows and some don't. When you have teaching fellows, they're just such wonderful, wonderful thought partners on like sifting through. My teaching fellows often help me not overreact to the feedback. They're like, no, actually, that's just one person. So, I'm zinged by it and I want to respond. And they're like, like that's just somebody had a bad day or whatever, but we have these other people saying, but also if I don't have a teaching fellow, just having some kind of colleague where I can be like, okay, I got all this stuff. What's most important? Here's what I'm thinking. It's hard to do it all in your own head though.
So I want to be mindful of our time. We only have about 2 minutes left. So I want to just say a huge thank you to Todd and Liz, our panelists, and to the HILT folks for convening us today, and to Noelle for co-facilitating with me. And I want to just leave you with just 3 thoughts. So first of all, as you begin the spring semester, I'm going to challenge you to think of one strategy for improving your own approach to eliciting and acting on student feedback throughout your course in a dynamic, iterative manner, and write it down. My favorite tool is the sticky note on my computer. Your mileage might vary, but think of one change that you'd like to make, write it down, and try to hold yourself accountable and try that. My second point is that in the spirit of walking the talk, our host today in the VPAL office will be seeking some feedback on how this session went and how the broader showcase went. So we would really appreciate taking just a few moments to fill out that survey and give us some feedback. And rest assured that the HILT team is constantly reading feedback and making course corrections in all of our programming. So we really value your input. And then finally, I just wanted to say that we're going to curate notes from today's session and follow up to those of you who attended with a 1-page tip sheet, which will just share some of the ideas and strategies that were surfaced today. So thank you for your contributions and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, everyone.
And you can do voices on goodbye too.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.